Hello and welcome back to the Keep Right On podcast. I'm Alex Dicken, and as ever, I'm joined by my co-host Brian Dick. And today we're also joined by Benjamin Bloom. Benjamin is actually joining us to talk about Ipswich Town because, as we know, they are the kind of pinnacle, the dream for most clubs, big clubs that get relegated to League One nowadays, given that they managed to secure back-to-back promotions, first from League One finishing second to get back into the Championship, and then repeating that feat in the Championship to get into the Premier League. Benjamin, thank you very much for coming on. How are you doing?
It's a pleasure. As you can imagine, talking about Ipswich, given what's just happened, is not a chore at the moment. And I'm sure, look, there needs to be some tempering of this conversation, but I think it's probably something a few Blues fans have looked at since the relegation.
Yeah, indeed. Listen, if we come across as envious or jealous, you know, just slap us down, Benjamin. As Alex said, you very much are. Ipswich is very much the blueprint that we're all trying to follow here. Before we get underway, just tell us where we can find your content, because I know you'll be a face that's known to many Blues fans because of your years covering the EFL. But just give us a reminder where everyone can find your stuff, please.
Yeah, so YouTube, the Benjamin Bloom football channel. For more specific Ipswich stuff, it's the Blue Monday podcast. But probably Birmingham fans, well, they'll hope they'll be very much on the Benjamin Bloom football channel side of it next season again.
Yeah, indeed. So let's just lay the table. Obviously, we all know that Ipswich have gone right through the Championship into the Premier League. I think it's fair to say it wasn't always this good. So Ipswich, I think, Benjamin, right in saying they went down in 2019, and it took them 2 or 3 seasons to get on the right track. Benjamin, what state was the club in when that team was relegated? Was it McCarthy's team? Was it that went down?
No, it wasn't McCarthy's team. And there's going to be a lot of parallels here with ownership. It's not fair for me to say that Marcus Evans, the Ipswich owner, was as bad as Trillion Trophy Asia in terms of neglect. But what you did have was a hapless owner who'd decided that going up against the parachute teams with his wealth and what he was prepared to spend wasn't worth it anymore in the Championship. Look, obviously, Birmingham fans had it much worse. You know, you guys have probably written thousands of words on this and probably still don't even know who these people are because it was so kind of cloak and dagger with Trillion, wasn't it? But that's the big parallel where you have a disinterested, absentee owner in the Championship, and we all know that the Championship's crazy in terms of the 3 teams coming down with the gigantic wage bill and then the parachute payments in there, and just this weird inequality with what their balance sheet says and what, say, Birmingham's balance sheet says. And Birmingham more so than Ipswich kind of spent and went for it and had the transfer embargoes. But the point being is they both ended up in the same place. The big difference is Ipswich stagnated in League One for a couple of seasons under Marcus Evans, whereas Birmingham have already had the takeover in the Championship. And the conversation today is not about the operational errors by Knighthead Capital last season. You will know what they were and the 4 managers through the season. The big difference, Brian, is the takeover's already happened, and the lift-off point for Ipswich was A, the takeover, and B, the hiring of the new boss. And both of those things have already happened at Birmingham. So the way they got there is similar. Birmingham are actually in front of Ipswich in terms of those 2 factors already having happened before season 1 in League One starts.
Yeah, indeed. So how far into their League One experience were they when the takeover happened?
Depends what you want to believe, Brian.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was a long drawn out takeover. Obviously, it was American hedge fund money. So there was what's the athletic guy? Matt Slater was very confident a long time before it happened that it was going to happen. So we're into season 2 when this is actually happening. Obviously, it's Paul Lambert and Marcus Evans in the first season. Paul Lambert ridiculously got a 5-year contract halfway through that season, but this is not the topic of this conversation today. So long drawn out takeover, and Kieran McKenna was brought in season 3 in League One, but the takeover had kind of happened. Paul Cook came in at the end of season 2 and was very wink, wink, nudge, nudge in his interviews of, don't worry, we'll get through the end of this season. He obviously knew from what he was hinting at that the takeover was going to happen in the summer. But to all intents and purposes, you got the takeover happening at the end of a season. Then there were 2 complete seasons before Ipswich's promotion for League One was secured. Kieran McKenna came in the season before Ipswich obviously scored the high points total and got promoted from League One. So there was a bit of lag. What I'm saying is things weren't aligned for Ipswich. It's this analogy of trying to fix the plane while it's flying through the air, whereas Birmingham are going in. You know, everyone knows who Tom Wagner is and Knighthead for a season now, and Gary Cook and all that good stuff. And you're going to tell me all about the new manager who may or may not be in the ilk of Kieran McKenna, right?
Well, absolutely. Sorry, go on, Alex. Yeah.
No, I was going to come on to the parallels between the managerial appointments, because obviously Ipswich appointed McKenna, having had a very successful coaching career, been an assistant to some high-profile people, including Jose Mourinho. And, you know, Blues have gone down the exact same route, appointing a novice manager, but a very experienced coach, someone with 20 years experience, you know, working under the likes of Brendan Rodgers, Ange Postecoglou, Brian McDermott as well, who's been a championship regular in the past. What was the initial reaction when Ipswich appointed McKenna at that time? Was it scepticism or a little bit of cynicism, perhaps?
It's easy to be wise after the event because he's been so utterly brilliant. I didn't know who he was until the links started happening. I knew who Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was and Michael Carrick was on the Man United bench. I didn't know who Kieran McKenna was. So I've got to be really honest about this. And like you guys, I get tipped off about certain things and all of a sudden it's, Ben, you might want to look at this Manchester United coach, Kieran McKenna. And then you look and you kind of realise. I think we were at the point where we'd had, even down to their names, that they were all called Paul. Basically, we'd had Paul Hurst and Paul Lambert and Paul Kirk. And I think there was a bit of sense from Ipswich fans that this was something new and worth trying that hadn't been seen before. But under Marcus Evans, Ipswich tried every type of manager, more down the experienced, wizened, Mick McCarthy, Paul Lambert, Paul Cook mould. Although Paul Hurst was taken from the lower divisions. But we have seen this, haven't we, at plenty of clubs. I'm sure you can reel off names of other championship clubs who are now bringing in career coaches from big clubs with, high-profile players and academies and under-20 teams. So I can't sit here and say when McKenna got hired, I was like, now this is smart. I know why they're doing this. But I certainly wasn't. It did feel exciting because it was like, okay, young manager, and the Ipswich CEO Mark Ashton had said a lot about how he chose managers, but this felt kind of on brand with him. So hard not to be wise after the event, but I think I was behind it. Yeah.
What did he do in those early days when he first came in? Because looking at the seasons you had, 11th in the first season in League One, 9th in the second, and 11th in the third. McKenna obviously came in halfway through that 21-22 season. What did he get across the team in the early days? How did it look?
Well, there was a certain amount of tidying up needed doing, and I'm sure if you got Paul Cook in one of his more lucid moments off the record, he would admit that the way he handled the transition from the the Marcus Evans ownership to the Game Changer ownership. He was a bit bull in a china shop with it. He called himself the demolition man, and loads of players were signed and loads were... He didn't mitigate the chaos of 26 players out, 26 players in, or whatever the number was. So there was a bit of tidying up needed doing. Strangely, the first thing he did was played through at the back and sorted the defence out and worked forwards like that. But we'll go on to this in the conversation. League One is weird, okay? Because you have clubs like Birmingham who have a major honour more recently than 90% of clubs in the Premier League and have played a lot of Premier League seasons. On the one hand, you have those clubs, and I say this with all love and respect to the clubs I'm about to list. On the other hand, Ipswich were playing Accrington, Cheltenham, Morecambe, Forest Green. And again, don't call me a snotty football fan, they've got non-league setups. And what you find is the Premier League clubs that have failed, they don't go any lower than League One. You get Bradford maybe in League Two. That's where they stop. And Forest Greens don't go any higher than League One. So you have this really weird muddle of clubs. And at some point, Birmingham fans, you're going to lose to someone that you've never lost to, and it's going to feel really weird. But it's just because, they play some lovely League Two direct style football and they beat you on the given day, and it is what it is. And, some days you'll play beautiful Championship style football in League One and you'll smash someone 5-6-0 or something. It's a weird division in that respect. So there was a bit of sort of mitigation of that. But he got on a run. So I've gone off on a tangent there on my League One theory, Alex. But he got on a run quite quickly. But, and I hope for Birmingham's case, this is not the same. League One for the last couple of seasons Ipswich was brutal. Where you got the season Ipswich went up, Sheffield Wednesday didn't get promoted with 96 points or something. And the season Ipswich, the season before they went up, they were 11th. There was a playoff chase, but that was brutal. I think you needed something like, I don't know, bring the tables up, but you needed over 80 points or something to even get in the playoffs, which is absurdly high as well. So there was a definitive split at the top of League One where, in leagues, you normally get this cascade of, okay, these teams might beat these teams and that's that. It was, right, these teams beat everyone else. These teams lose to everyone at the bottom. And then, it kind of divided into 4 or 5 blocks. So it was hard for McKenna in that regard. But I think once he got his ideas across, and this is probably a theme Birmingham fans will want to hear, the time of developing those themes in League One at that level, with the level of player Ipswich were able to afford in League One, without the hard FFP cap that doesn't apply in League One, that does apply in the Championship, was, and nobody wants to be in League One, no Birmingham fan wants to be in League One, we get it, but it was a bit of a benefit.
The FFP thing is interesting. You mentioned the season you go up from League One. I'm looking at the league table now, actually. 46 games, 28 wins, 14 draws, 4 defeats, 101 goals scored, only 35 conceded. That's the best attack in the league and the best defence, 66 goal difference. Still
and they didn't win the league.
Still
so
finished second,
isn't it?
Yeah, that's incredible. Still
well
finished
done,
second.
Plymouth.
So in that season, you mentioned what McKenna has done when he's taken over and how he's kind of built towards that. Was it, brilliant football, like we saw in the Championship last season, right from the get-go, or was there still teething issues in that season?
Oh, massively. It's kind of Valentine's Day of that season. Ipswich go to Bristol Rovers and draw 0-0. Sammy Morsey is having a bit of a pop back at the away fans who are not being very polite at the end of the game. And we're looking at it thinking, we got to be careful we don't drop out the playoffs here, because we had a little bit of I say a little bit of an iffy run. It was an absurd standard that Sheffield Wednesday and Plymouth were setting, and you actually had Barnsley were looking like they were going to come in and join the title picture, and we were having a conversation, are 4 teams going to score 90 points? Which, amazingly, we had the same conversation in the Championship last season in terms of ridiculous standard. But what you might find interesting is what he actually had to do is embrace League One a little bit more and understand that you have to run and you have to be able to defend and you have to be able to play direct at times. And you might have your Spurs academy coach who, can coach the best young players in the world, basically, if it's a Spurs academy or a under 20, represent. You'll tell me more about the background there. But he learned, I heard Liam Richardson, he explained this to me in the best way. He said, you have to be able to play in League One, but you have to be able to fight and you have to be able to run. And I think he figured that out halfway through the season. And go and look at it, Alex. It's beautiful. 13 wins in 14 games. They scored something like 63 goals and conceded 4. It's ridiculous the run they went on. It is the best run. And also they beat they went away to Derby and won. They went away to Barnsley and won, and Peterborough and won. And they won like 2-0, 3-0 and 3-0. So they got into gear. And as much as you have to give massive credit to Plymouth, who were the champions, they obliterated the end of that season. They did also sign in January, I've got to remember the 4, Harry Clark, Nathan Broadhead, Massimo Luongo. There's one more. I'm so sorry, I'm going to forget who else came in. They had a brilliant transfer window. And the sort of numbers we're hearing quoted that Knighthead are preparing to spend, which the whole rest of the division are going to hate you for this, but, dropping £1 million on a fullback in League One is the same as a parachute team signing Tom Cannon for £8 million and then not even using him and winning the league. Yeah, that's the levels. But yeah, the big thing is he twigged the hybrid style you have to play in League One. And as much as I think Birmingham are going to try and be pleasing on the eye, you've got to be able to defend long throw-ins. You've got to be able to see out the first 15 minutes of a game. You've got to do it on crap pitches sometimes as well in the away games. And I think he figured that out halfway through the season.
Yeah, just want to come on to that actually, Ben, because I was speaking to a championship coach just a couple of days ago, and he said the experience of League One is from November to February, the pitches turn to pot, and you almost have to become a different team. And I think in reference to what Derby did last season is that they got mugged at Stevenage and the fans went into meltdown, and it was very much their nadir of their campaign.
There's your example though, Brian. That's
exactly
what you're up against, a Stevenage. And I've got respect for it. They are going to boot the ball into your box 15 times in the first 10 minutes, yeah?
Yeah, indeed. But Paul Warren was such a canny operator. He knew League One. He knew the pitches had turned to puddings. They really gutsed out those 2 or 3 months, and then they started to play a bit more towards when the weather dried up again. So it illustrates your 2 points about, yes, you need to be able to fight and you need to be able to play, but also you also need to expect your nose to be bloodied on any given Saturday. You made reference to the really good transfers that were quite transformative. Alex and I, we've sat in this virtual room before and thought, how have Ipswich got into the Premier League with Sam Morsey and Massimo Luongo? Ask
the Middlesbrough fans who had both of them as well and gave them away.
Do you know what? If this isn't about those 2 players, how was that analytically driven? What was the philosophy behind finding 2 relatively mundane journeyman players and fitting them into a system or a machine and making them cogs that worked within that machine? Just tell us about the transfers a little bit, please.
Those 2 particularly, Brian, you've got to be humble about this. It wasn't analytics at all. Sam Morsey was with Paul Cook at so this is just, it's a combination here of luck and an extraordinary coaching performance over 2 years is that you need to be looking at Kieran McKenna rather than Sam Morsey and Mass Luongo. But no, Paul Cook had Morsey. I think he might have had him twice. Your commenters all know. Definitely had him at Wigan. I think he might have had him at Chesterfield as well. Sam Morsey signed for Paul Cook, and Ipswich wouldn't have got Sam Morsey if Paul Cook wasn't the Ipswich manager. And sorry, it sounds like I'm name dropping left and right. I got to ask Neil Warnock about this. Neil Warnock didn't want to sell Sam Morsey, but I think the director of football was doing the transfer business at Middlesbrough, which is why Neil Warnock is no longer the Middlesbrough manager, essentially. So, and with Massimo Luongo, I think Ipswich probably wanted to sign Jack Taylor in that window from Peterborough, and Dara didn't want to do the deal until the end of the season. And I think Luongo was kind of signed as a bit of kind of squad filler, really. But he was a good experienced pro, playing in a brilliant pattern of play under a manager doing an absurd job. When you're going to ask me about Leif Davis and Harry Clarke, then you say, okay, right, we get the... It's interesting you picked out those two, Brian, but with some of the other players, with Nathan Broadhead, Leif Davis and Harry Clarke, you can tell me now that they all have in common, they came through at big academies where they were well coached. They maybe hadn't quite found their level yet. League One teams couldn't afford to get them, but Ipswich could, and they wouldn't drop. And I don't know, they'd had loans as well in the Championship. I mean, Broadhead was at Wigan and Clarke was at Stoke. Literally the season they ended up signing for Ipswich. George Hurst on loan. Sorry, the other one that came in. So again, came through Leicester. So the plan was clearly to get players who'd been brought through at big academies and hadn't quite found their career path just yet. So, but yeah, so fascinating you pick up Morsey and Luongo, because I'm not sure those ones might be a bit more of, oh, well, I've got Sam Morsey, and I mean, yeah, ended up looking like prime Pirlo, and you're like, hang on, I remember Morsey going around kicking everybody at Wigan and Borough, but that's on the manager, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It is ultimately a good manager makes the best of the resources they've got available to them at the time. You know, we can make observations about England, can't we? Alex, we're kind of eating into more time than we asked Ben to come on for. Anyways.
Keep going. I love it. You're talking about 197 points in 2 seasons. I'll talk about it all day.
Yeah. Anyway, it's been lovely spending time with you, Ben. Yeah. Alex, you wanted to ask about the sort of. Go on, you asked the question.
So basically, when Brian and I both visited Portman Road back in February in that 3-1 game, and I think as we were walking into the stadium, we were both really impressed by kind of the community aspect and everything that was going on around the stadium. We know that Knighthead, the Blues owners, are trying to do something similar by, putting up fan parks, 2 fan parks before the new season starts, and trying to create a buzz around the stadium. They've done things like, host a concert after a match on Easter Monday. Can you explain where is that being driven at Ipswich? Because it does at the moment feel like, from a Birmingham City point of view, that Ipswich are kind of the club that you want to kind of strive to be. Do you know what I mean? Because they're doing things correctly.
Yeah, the unity from outward looking in, the whole town seems to be, Ipswich Town mad. And I think that's what we're trying to create here.
All of that is true. Remember, if the team's not winning, no one cares about the community bits and the unity and all of that. It all does come from the team winning, as cynical and horrible as that says. That's where you get the buy-in. I always remember driving in for the promotion game against Huddersfield at the end of the season, which was just a weird day when you've watched the last 20 years of Ipswich, you're still thinking, what is going on here? We're about to get promoted to the Premier League. How are we going to mess this up? This isn't real. And all I saw was children in Ipswich kits. And I didn't see anyone wearing an Ipswich kit between 2016 and 2021, let alone, people buying them for their kids and their kids not wanting to wear a Haaland or a Odegaard shirt or Bruno Fernandes shirt or what have you. So they've done a good job. They tidied up the ground straight away. Again, obviously the issues at Birmingham, you literally had the thing closed for half a season, didn't you? Were way worse in terms of the disrepair that Trillian had let it fall into. I think, Brian, they just did things properly, and it hadn't been done. It's the bare minimum, isn't it, to go into the schools and, integrate with the community and, speak to the players, the great players that have been at the club before and, given their careers for the club and, sort the fans out somewhere to go and have a pint before the game and all of that good stuff. So I think it was just the bare minimum. I know Knighthead are really looking at some like massive reconstruct, more like a Manchester City, gonna literally change the whole area around the infrastructure around there. So that buy-in, again, everyone was moaning in Valentine's Day of the season they got promoted from League One. So it's all about winning on the pitch. I just want to come in on what Alex said about everyone's going to look at Ipswich now as the model for a big team in League One. And he's totally right. But I just want to...
Don't tell him that, for heaven's sake.
No,
we have enough problems with him already.
Brian, he's totally right. But something that used to really grind my gears, right, when I was covering the Championship is... And I never want to take the hope away from any football supporter. We all want our team to have great times and we want to be there and experience them and have great moments, don't we? But I would hear people say, Ben, my team is following the Brentford and Brighton model and they're going to get promoted from the Championship and stabilise in the Premier League and play beautiful football and only ever sign good players and sell them on for millions of pounds and then sign more good players for more money and sell them on. And this is all going to be candy and rainbows and unicorns. And I would say, what does that mean? Are you going to follow the Brentford-Brighton model? Well, that's a bit like me saying I'm going to follow the Casanova model of picking up women, or I'm going to follow the Elon Musk model of setting up a business and making money. It's a great thing to say, but it's easier said than done. Now, Birmingham fans, I'm not calling you stupid. You're not. We get it. You've seen plenty of stuff, and I'm sure your expectations are grounded. But what people need to understand is there's the Sunderland model in League One, there's the Leeds model, there's the Sheffield United model, there's the Derby model. Bolton are in there. They're a big club. What I'm saying is Ipswich are a massive outlier. Massive outlier. Sunderland were the first team to get promoted to the Championship, I think, and finish in the top 10 or something in like 10 years or something. And then for Ipswich to go back to back, there's a reason that Southampton and Norwich did it. And then they introduced the parachute payments over 3 seasons. And all of a sudden, nobody could do it anymore. So what I just want to say to Birmingham fans is, yes, the parallels are massive. American investment, big club in League One. Arguably, Ipswich weren't the biggest club in League One because Sheffield Wednesday was in there. I think Birmingham are going to be the biggest club in League One, even though we know Wrexham have got more money than God, and Bolton will be around there as well, and Barnsley and Pitt, they're all been in the playoffs for 2 seasons running, haven't they? The point I'm trying to make is, don't be crazy enough to think that because there's lots of parallels, that the same thing will happen. It's very much sensible to say, right, what's working here? What's the trend? How can Birmingham best follow the lessons that Ipswich learned? And I know you're not saying to me, there's parallels. Birmingham are now going to go back to back, and in 2 years' time, they'll be in the Premier League having scored 90. What did Ipswich get? 99 and 97 points in consecutive seasons, 96 points, so I don't exaggerate it. But do you understand the point I'm making? That it's sensible to look at what's happened and what's done wrong, but it's what's gone right. But it's not sensible to look at a complete outlier of a freak 2 seasons of an incredible managerial job as well. You've got to factor in that Kieran McKenna is probably the best performing manager in English football over the last 2 seasons. Even, I know Pep Guardiola's done the treble and whatnot, but, you know, winning the Premier League twice with the most money and the best players is not the same as taking a team from 11th in League One to back-to-back promotions. What are your thoughts on what I'm saying? That there needs to be an acknowledgement of what Ipswich have done, but it's not fair on Knighthead to expect them to replicate what Ipswich. What are your thoughts?
No, I don't think anyone expects them to do that. I think, you know, Ipswich, like you say, they are an outlier, like Norwich were back in the day and like Southampton were in getting back-to-back promotions. It doesn't happen very often. I think the one thing that Knighthead will want and that Birmingham City fans will want is that to get promoted this year, I think that has to be a given. They have to get back up straight away. I know it'll be a tough league, but they have to get back up straight away. And then straight away, they have to be in a position where they can actually compete in the Championship. And, you know, I'm not saying finish top 6. I'm not saying finish top 2 like Ipswich did. But, you know, be in a position where they've got absolutely no worries about relegation. They've got a squad that can potentially challenge for the playoffs, because I don't think it's that difficult to challenge for the playoffs in the Championship if you get your recruitment right. We saw that with a number of teams in last season, but also the season before last one. I think on the final day, there was about 4 or 5 teams who could have actually finished 6th. And it was Sunderland who eventually got that spot and went into the playoffs. But I think it would be realistic to expect Blues to be in a position where they can go straight up and then compete well and do okay.
Can I just fire back against something you said? So Birmingham don't go up next season, okay? They either miss the playoffs or they lose in the playoffs. What are your thoughts on that scenario? Because you just got to be aware that you've got a new manager coming in. League One is this weird hodgepodge. You get a bad start. Bolton are going to put whatever 80, 90 points on the board. Peterborough do the same. You can't get in the top 2. You lose in the playoffs. Do you know what I'm saying? It's very easy to come down to League One as Birmingham City, who have got a major honour and years in the Premier League, and think it makes all the sense in the world that Birmingham will win League One next season, doesn't it? Birmingham should score 95 points and win League One next season. What if they don't, is my question to you.
Well, there are examples of that. Leeds United, when they got relegated, even though they had a points deduction the first season, they still eventually got into the mix, but they didn't go up for, I think it was 3 seasons. So, yeah, there are no guarantees that the Blues will go straight back up, but you would hope they're going to have the biggest budget in the league. You'd hope that at least, if recruitment is done correctly, it should get them into the top 6, shouldn't it? And then obviously you don't want the lottery of the playoffs. You know, everyone says it's the most exciting way to go up, and yes, it is. But you don't want to have your whole season, 46-game season, rest on 3 effective lotteries. You'd rather be in the top 2. And with the squad they're going to have and the players that they are taking down, most of whom are decent Championship players. You look at someone like Sun Kopek, Christian Bielik, Koji Miyoshi. They all did quite well in the Championship last season and in seasons before in Bielik's case. So you'd hope that they will have enough to be in the top 2 or definitely be in the conversation like Sheffield Wednesday were, for example. And, you know, they're a crazy example in the season that Ipswich went up, that they finished 3rd with, I think it was 96 points.
96, yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, if Blues finish 3rd with 96 points, you can't really moan too much, can you? Because that's...
You're just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
If that happens.
It comes down to the narrative at the end of next season. Hopefully next season does end with Blues in the top 1 or 2 positions.
But
if
they're
3rd, sorry, Ben, if they're 3rd and Chris Davis has proved himself to be a real success in his first season in senior as a number 1, and you can see young players and an energetic team and a style of football evolving, that's a lot easier to sell and for Knighthead to go, okay, it's not what we want, but you know, we are inching forward rather than flying forward.
That was what I was going to add, Brian, that context is king. I just wanted to ask you two, though, because one thing that Birmingham can't have that Ipswich had in their back-to-back is Ipswich got a run at the first season of the back-to-back, didn't they? Essentially, because Kieran McKenna was already there from December. Pattern of play started then, 6 months before Chris Davies has got. Leif Davis is already there. Sam Morsey's already there. Do you know what I'm saying? The players are kind of already arriving. So all I'm saying is, if you're a Birmingham fan and you score, as Brian said, 90 points and you lose in the playoffs, and Chris Davis has put good football on the pitch, the pattern of play is building, it might not be the worst thing in the world to develop that squad and that pattern of play for one more year in League One, score another 95 points and get promoted. And then, do you see what I'm saying? You'd almost rather get promoted in that manner in 2 seasons than in 1 season kind of botching it together and you've changed the manager in February because it wasn't working. And do you see what I'm saying? It's interesting, isn't it?
It's all about going back to the Championship and being Championship ready, isn't it? And
exactly, yeah.
And none of us know how easy that will be to do in a two-month pre-season. What's left of the transfer window, we'll only find that as the games start being played.
Yeah, I genuinely think we should wrap this up before Benjamin talks into 2 seasons in League One.
Mate, get out of there as quickly as you can. Can I just ask you one question? How aggressive do you think they're going to be in terms of transfer fees and salary? Because, I mean, everyone's going to hate Wrexham for having more money anyway. Ipswich, I think there was a stat that there were like £3 million signings in League One in Ipswich's first season with Game Changer, and 2 of them were Ipswich's fullbacks.
Yeah, I mean, we've said this on a couple of podcasts, haven't we, Brian? I think there's a very good chance that Blues could break the League One transfer record for the right player. You know, some of the names they've been linked with already would probably command that, wouldn't they, Brian? So,
yeah.
You look at the salary aspect as well. Blues can carry Championship salaries in League One. So
yeah, very aggressive is the one word answer. I think, Ben.
So, a well coached team. This is where it becomes really difficult for your debuting manager, because it gets very binary. It's like when you talk about the parachute teams in the Championship, where basically, even if you get to the playoffs, lose in the most unlucky way possible, it's a failure if you don't go up, isn't it?
Yeah. I suppose you could say that, but you know, like you said, if they got 90 plus points and finished 3rd and then lost in the playoffs,
Agreed.
Yeah. Brian, we done?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Ben,
yeah.
Thanks very much for your time. Really interesting insight there.
My pleasure. And all I would say to the Birmingham fans is try and enjoy League One. I'm sure you're not looking forward to it.
No chance.
But nobody wants to get relegated. But I think now, if you said to any Ipswich fan in 2019, when they stank out the Championship and got relegated with 30-something points, that if you put up with 3 more years of crap, you're going to get the next 2 years, they would have all shook hands on it and said, okay, I'll do that deal just to see what you've just promised transpire. So potentially, even though it was an outlier and I'm saying don't expect it, it could be the rebirth of the club, couldn't it?
Indeed. So there we are. We're hoping that Chris Davis is the next Kieran McKenna. We're hoping Birmingham City can take a two-season shortcut on the Ipswich Town experience.
3 seasons, right?
And bounce straight back up to the Championship. Alex, thank you very much for your time. Ben, thank you very much for your time. Been really interesting. Hope you've all enjoyed it, and it's keep right on. Certainly from 2 of us, if not 3 of us.
Keep right on.